Well, I could spend a lot of time showing you my garden, but I thought it'd be kind of cool today to get away and get up into the mountains and see some of the native flora around here, and maybe we'll even see a few animals, but they'll probably be just insects. I'll be back in the garden soon, but until then, let's go for a little walk on the mountains and see what we find. I think you'd be quite amazed at some of the plants that you've never seen before, and then ones that you probably recognize as well. So let's go. Okay, so our first stop is this temple. Oh, it's not a temple, it's a shrine, sorry. You can tell the shrine by that gate we just went through. It's called a tori. There's another smaller one. It's kind of like you're entering, a sacred space. And this is right outside my my home, in fact, named after the area of Toinu. And let's see. Yeah, over here we have our first interesting thing to look at. This is a Camellia japonica. Camellia, as some of you probably know, is a common ornamental of all around the world these days in relatively warm temperate climates. It can take freezing. This is in the tea family, Phaceae. One of the more distinctive features of this plant are these glossy green leaves. You can see the bright new green leaves here. These are very soft and they have a lot of oil on them. So in the times past, these were actually used to produce a very high quality oil, tsubaki oil. You can still buy it today. Also, the related species is Camellia Sinensis, which is actually the tea plant. So here is another plant that has a very long history in Japan and China, and is a lovely flowering plant too. It has these beautiful red flowers that they're just about finished. This tree over here has some. I'll see if I can find one. They fall to the ground whole, and so the legend has it that these were like the samurai heads that had been severed from their bodies after they had committed suicide. Okay, venturing a little further back from the shrine area are these old, well, these were probably rice paddies in the old days, these terraced areas, and there's a number of plants up here, including orchids, that might be of interest, so let's go check them out. Okay, so traveling up this mountain, these are old forest paths in here. A lot of terracing of these hillsides, and I can only guess that at one time that was due to agriculture in the past, but these hills have not been agriculturalized for a long time. Anyway, we're coming up to the next species we're going to look at here, that is highly associated with Japan, but actually is another import that's become established here. And this is Philostachys edulis. Used to be also known as Philostachys pubescens. This is the moso bamboo. So you can see next to this big bamboo shoot being made by the Philostachys. A lot of people, I guess a lot of people know this nowadays, but these are grasses, okay? So these used to be the graminoids, but now they've been changed into the family Poaceae. So this includes all the common lawn grasses you can think of and whatever else. So their growth, just like any other plant, they're not a woody plant, they're herbaceous, right? So their growth is determinate, meaning that once the stem that the leaves are growing off of finishes growing, it cannot grow any higher. However, that said, each one of these stems, also known as culms, can last for up to 12 seasons, and they will, in the spring they defoliate, so right now the leaves are all turning yellow, and they will come into this incredible glorious new growth in about another few weeks. And these shoots, now this shoot is getting way too big to eat, but this part up here is quite delicious, and I've actually made a video about preparing these. The woods nowadays are just full of people out hunting for these things, and you'll see these shorter ones growing in the ground, and those are the ones that you want. You get in there with a little hatchet or an axe or a pick, and you pick them out from the rhizome or the root. This is not another native. This is a native of China, and it has become widespread in southern Japan, all the way up, I believe, even as far north as Hokkaido in the southern parts. And it has become an invasive pest, in fact, and it's taking over a lot of forest land, so it has to be managed and controlled. But nevertheless, it still is a very beloved plant in Japan because it's so associated with this culture, and as a food item, as a traditional food item. So this is not going anywhere. And plus, it's just a beautiful thing. You know, walking in one of these forests, these brilliant blue-green culms everywhere, and they're knocking together, making that classic, bamboo in the wind sound, is really quite an experience. Here's another interesting find. Here's the native wisteria growing up a big Philostachys culm. This is Wisteria brachybotryes. I'll talk about that one a little bit later. If I can find one in flower, I'm sure I will. Okay, so here we have a member of the genus Wisteria. This is Wisteria brachybotryes. Brachybotryes means short stems, so those flower cluster stems are much shorter than we would think of normally of a wisteria vine. This species is actually quite common in southern Japan. It grows wild, and it is cultivated. Outside of Japan, it's relatively unknown, and the better known one from Japan is Floribunda, and then of course Sinensis from China. Beautiful plant this time of year. Another plant I was hoping we were going to see is this orchid. This is Syphilanthera falcata. And there's one that's out of bloom, and here's another one. And boom, I found one in bloom. So let's check this out. So this lovely plant is called, hold on, let me get it right, kinnan in Japanese, which means golden orchid because of obviously the yellow flowers. And the closely related species, which also lives right over here, but I don't know if it's in bloom yet, is Syphilanthera erecta, which is called ginnan, which means silver orchid because of its white flower. This is becoming a fairly rare plant in Japan these days, at least in some areas, due to actually over-collection. People have been collecting these and selling them in the trade. It has a look of almost like a cypripedium, like, this sort of a alternate leaf, that kind of a pubescent leaf. So out of flower, you could mistake it as a cypripedium species. These are non-obligate mycoheterotrophs, which means they parasitize fungi, which parasitize other tree roots and things like that in the soils. Okay, so they call them mycorrhizal cheaters. What they do is they actually cheat the mycorrhizal fungi of their nutrients. Anyway, it's now known that the bulk, if not all, orchids are actually mycoheterotrophs. It's just some of them continue on with a very close relationship like that the rest of their lives. For instance, this species, and all the Syphilantheras are that way. And some of them that are achlorophyllous, meaning they are not green, they have no chlorophyll and cannot produce their own food, actually are obligate mycoheterotrophs. Well, here's our next orchid species. This is Calanthe discolor, and actually this is a fairly typical color form. You can see that the flowers are actually kind of a discolored. They're usually bicolored, kind of a brownish tepals and a whitish lip with the pink insuffusing. Of the native Calanthe of this area, this is the most sturdy. They can put up with a lot of abuse, and it's one of the few species that is remaining successful here in Japan throughout its range, regardless of forestry practices, collection, pressure, and so on. Obviously not a very desirable type to grow, and that's why this particular type is left alone. If you do see nice plants around, and I have seen them through the years in these woods, they eventually disappear. People take them. So anyway, another native orchid in bloom here. This is a place I've taken you before. This is a colony of our native Cymbidium goringi. Looks pretty healthy, but wow. I see one flower there. Only one flower in this whole colony. It looks to me like this is an issue of too dry weather. Let's take a little walk over here and see what's going on with these guys. Yeah, it's just been too dry. Look at that. Flowering stems, but toast. You can see that this colony is growing on this tree that's upended, this oak tree, which is still alive. And this actually is ideal growing conditions for them, but the last few weeks have been pretty dry, so I guess that spelled disaster for these guys. There's more up the way here, so hopefully some that are in the ground will still be in good shape. So let's go check those out. Navigating these hillsides is not as easy as it looks. This is quite a slope we have here. We're coming down through a, this is a Hinoki Cypress plantation forest. So this is not a native forest. The native forest is a broadleaf evergreen forest, a laurelin type forest, which can be found in different parts of the world. Southeast Asia, extending from southern Japan all the way down into the tropical region, has this forest. And so a lot of that has been given way to these coniferous forest plantations, which are not native associations. But quite a few plants managed to continue living in them, including the Cymbidium. And there's a Cymbidium around here somewhere. I'm just seeing how I can find him again. It's really dry right now, but since he's growing in the ground, he might be okay. Just keep looking. Right around here. Ah, there he is. Let's hope the deer didn't get him. I bet they did. Yep, they did. Well, there's another one of the goringi, normally in flower, but the deer got him. There's been a lot of deer activity in the woods around here of late, and that's going to be a topic for a whole nother video, I think, about conservation of plants, especially rare plants like orchids, in the future in Japan. Situation, I'm sorry to say, is not very good right now, and one of the issues is extreme abundance of deer. We'll talk more about that in another video, though. So let's see about this with the colony over here. Maybe there's a few blooming. I pray, cross your fingers. Well, here's a sorry state in which I find these Cymbidiums in. This is clearly evidence of deer damage, this gnawing off. I've looked around this whole area and I have not found one nice flower. There's one little distorted flower up here. I'm afraid that this is kind of the future of a lot of places in Japan. And it's just amazing to me that just a handful of years ago, I was at this very same colony, and I'll go ahead and put a link up there so you can see it right now, of this colony, and it was in wonderful shape, and here it is, looking like this. Is there a recovery? One can hope. This particular plant is a fairly common species in throughout much of Japan, and I'm not worried for its fate per se. I just wonder about the forests and the future of Japanese forest. There really has been a local degradation of the forests around here in the almost 20 years that I've been here, and here's a great example of it. So sorry to say that today we're not going to see any nice goringi flowers. Probably we might. Maybe I can find a colony somewhere, but it's not looking good. And here you can see there's that laurel type forest. You can see these broadleafed evergreens, oak trees. So there's a lot of family of Fagus in here, as well as the Taiheiyo, the teas and also the laurel family. Okay, so this is the kind of forest that existed throughout much of Southeast Asia and southern Japan, and this has been replaced in many places by this single plantation forest, single age Hinoki cypress. Yes, a native tree, but not meant to grow like this. As you can see, the laurelland forest is seeding in and it's trying to take over, but those of course will all be cut back in due time. Anyway, this kind of plantation forest covers something like 60% of Kyushu at this point in time, so that's the situation we're in. Okay, so here's another plant of interest. This is Photinia, commonly called red tip in the horticultural trade. This is the Japanese species glabra. This is in the rose family. Anyway, a very common garden plant that is also found in these woods very commonly. So I thought that would be interesting for you all to see, especially you who have either this species or a hybrid in your garden. Here it is, red tip living inside its native habitat here in southern Japan. Also a member of this laurel type forest. Well, here I am sitting in this luxurious growth of the native, if I can reach it, the native pepper. This is related to black pepper, Pipera nigrum. This is Pipera katsura. This is a very common vine of the lowlands around Japan. The fruit, if you've ever seen a fruiting vine of pepper, it's this kind of a spiral type fruit, and can be different colored berries. In this case, the berries are colored orange. It's very tempting to think that this would be something you'd want to throw in the stew or something, but the truth of the matter is that this particular species has very little flavor or very little spice. I think probably in the past it was used traditionally as some sort of an herb, but is not used at all. A lot of people, even Japanese people, don't realize that it's not really a useful spice. And here is a colony covering this whole area actually of a native ginger. This is Zingiber myoga. It's commonly just called myoga in Japanese, and it's just coming up now, so it's not ready yet, but out of the base of these growths, there will come up these little short, kind of bulbous buds. They don't even look like buds, they look like some kind of a growth thing, and they have a little beautiful yellow flower. Well, the Japanese eat those. They slice them up and use them as a garnish on things like ramen or whatever, different dishes, or in certain pickle dishes. And so it's an important kind of a spicy herb here in Japan. Obviously this belongs to the ginger family, the Zingiberaceae, which includes a lot of other common edible plants, things like turmeric and cardamom, and of course the edible gingers as well. And plenty of other gingers that are people don't eat, but they are being used quite a bit in warmer gardens throughout the world. So here's another interesting and useful and edible plant that is very common in the woods around my house. Well, here's another one of these Calanthe discolor. This one you can see is a much prettier form. They can, sorry about that guy. Pretty nice smell on this one too. They're kind of a sweet odor. As I said, this is a very successful species here in Japan, despite all of the forestry practices of the last 100 years or so, and it seems to stand up pretty well to most deer situations, although I've seen mountains where this also has been clipped down because the deer are literally eating everything. But here in this one little valley, which I'm going to show you in a second, it's pretty safe. It's been doing okay. It's a little colony up here, and again, these are too drab for the collectors to be interested in them, so they just leave them alone. Well, this is a valley that I have been visiting for about the past 16 years now. You can see it's a Hinoki Plantation on one side, and on the other sides there is this lovely group of moso bamboo. But also fascinating, at the bottom of it here is a huge colony of this aroid. This is Aricema ringens, also known as the Cobra Lily in the horticultural trade. Well, as you can see, the probably most exciting thing about this plant are these giant leaves, these beautiful, glorious, glaucous leaves. But also underneath those leaves, if you look down in there, you'll see the reason it's called the Cobra Lily. The flower is this incredible curled up structure, usually a dark purple, but also can range to green. It has a flower that's very typical of this family, the aroids. So this is the Araceae. These are the arums of the aroid family. And these contain things like, the skunk cabbage and the spathiphyllum, and of course these things which we call the jack-in-the-pulpits, right? Aricema, genus Aricema. This genus is characterized by a number of different things, but I'm going to talk about those in a little bit because there's going to be another species here that we're going to run into, and you'll be able to see it better with that one. Anyway, this thing is just incredible leaves. These can go up to over a meter across. There's a pair of leaves going like that. It can be over a meter. It's just incredibly tropical looking plant that can be grown in temperate climates. So here's another Aricema species. This is Aricema Cerreta. You can also see that this is a bonus plant because it also is a variegated type. This is a highly variable plant to the point where I believe that the taxonomists are still kind of up in the air about exactly what's what. There seem to be possibly polyploidy in some of these, in particular these variegated types. These things they can get huge. I mean, I've seen these standing well over a meter tall, almost as tall as me, and I'm 170 centimeters. You can see the flower type can be this kind of a green color, or they can be a almost black color. So it's really quite amazing, the range there as well. Also, interesting thing about the flower is this looks a heck of a lot like the North American A. triphyllum, which is the one that everybody seems to know so well as jack-in-the-pulpit. Well, this has the same kind of deal. You've got inside here this thing called the spathe, which is an inflorescence, a special inflorescence that's common to all of the aroids. It's just this big long thing, and it's got a whole bunch of these little micro flowers on there, and the male flowers are up top and the female flowers are towards the bottom, and you would think that that would be some kind of a gravity self-pollination deal, but apparently that's not the case. Rather, they seem to attract beetles, which will go in there and pollinate them, interestingly enough. I have to literally sit down here and lie down on the ground to be down with this little guy. As you can see, he is a miniature. This is Cephalanthera erecta, also known as kinnan, which means silver orchid. So if you remember the other Cephalanthera before, Falcata, this is kind of the sister species. Also a microheterotroph and highly dependent upon its microheterotrophy. There's a small loose colony that's I've been watching here for a number of years. We're going to go ahead and finish the video there. I mean, I'm looking at more trees and stuff over here I could tell you about. You can go on forever. There are so many things to see in these woods. They're so full of life, and yeah, especially in these times where it's been hard to look at the silver lining of life, it's everywhere, and it certainly is in these woods. And so, I'm on the doorstep of one of the biggest cities in Japan, and yes, there are bugs here, and there's probably a giant centipede under my butt right now, getting ready to bite me, but hey, life is good.